good morning, everybody, and welcome to Waking Up Cerberus. I'm Suzanne Sherman. I will be one of your hosts for the next hour here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. Want to welcome you and thank you for joining us today on February 5th, year of our Lord 2019. Jeff Johnson is in the studio with us, as always, managing the controls, making this show possible. Thank you so much, Jeff. And Greg Junkbond Carpenter is here as well. So we've got a lot to talk about today. I want to remind you to please watch us on YouTube. We have a live chat going on in the discussion there. You can also send me messages on my Facebook page and also on our Facebook page, Cerberus Radio Network. We also have a fan page. You can find us there as well. We have a SoundCloud page. If you cannot hear us live, go there. We always post the links. And Jeff is really good about getting our latest shows up there. On any of those, including Radio Co., you can hear the Wasatch Report, Liberty Minutes with Greg Carpenter. Also, he has this show, The Spy Who Loves Liberty. We're going to talk about yesterday's show a little bit and give you a bit of a recap because it ties into my main topic today, which is going to be cultural Marxism and how it really affects all of us, whether we really believe it does or not. Other shows we have, Case in Point, Fundamentals of Federalism, the Mark and Suzanne Show, Revolutionizing Radio. You can find past episodes there. Fear not, we will be having more soon. And boy, is it going to be something. I'm really looking forward to getting back going with that. That being said, want to welcome everybody. And Greg Junkbond, how are you today?
I am having a super magnificent day here in the People's Democratic Republic of Northern Virginia. It's a beautiful sunny day. We're looking at 70 degrees coming up here. So, it's kind of like one of those, I was just thinking of a show. Oh, I got it. Springtime for Liberals and Hillary.
Well, we're having a little bit different weather pattern out here. My email inbox was lit up with warnings from my county because I'm not capable of looking out the window on my own to determining what the weather is going to be. But we are having a severe storm alert out here. I actually took some video of it before the show. I'll upload it when we're off the air because it does take a while to upload videos out here.
Isn't the definition of a storm severe anyways? How do you have a mild storm? You know, it's just
a mild storm.
Yeah, that would be like a swirl, right?
Right. But we've got avalanche warnings. We don't typically get a lot of those, but even when I drive from where I am over through the mountain pass into Park City, I can look up at some of these steep passes and think, you know, there's a risk for avalanche there. So yes, we're finally getting some of those. I want to share a story. We're going to just get right into it that I came across. And it ties into the topic that we're going to get into today. A couple months ago, I found this article on Mises.org on their Wire page, Cultural Marxism, America's New Mainline Ideology. And we get reminders all the time. If people really don't think cultural Marxism is a reality that affects how we interact with each other, today will change your mind. You know, a couple weeks ago, we had the fight at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial over a drum and a hat.
The temple.
Yes, the Church of National Government. I tell people, you love Lincoln, you love this big government. You think the Constitution is your Bible. Take your pocket Constitution. Don't go to church. Go and worship on Sundays on the steps of your nearest federal courthouse. So, yeah, it was. And again, we mentioned on the show, nobody was really picking up on the irony that it took place at the very feet of the tyrant responsible for all of that we're going through right now. None of this would have been possible had he not overthrown the constitutional restraints. Again, I always say that was in the works before the ink was dry and the holy parchment. That being said, let me get into an article. And the story isn't really significant in and of itself, but the comments are. So we had a Colorado runner was attacked Monday by a mountain lion during a trail run. And this was near Fort Collins. So this was in Northern California. Colorado. So the runner's name has not been released, and he fought off the cougar, killing it in the process, and hiked out of the area and drove himself to the hospital. We could do a show there. I wonder if he had an IFAC. What did he have? How did he, or did he just hike out? I mean, when you're out there jogging, there's only so much you can carry. But I'd love to know how he fought off It was an 80-pound lion, not a big one, but even a bobcat can be absolutely devastating if it attacks. So anyway,
that's still big enough, and they're very intimidating, by the way. Those things.
Yeah, we have them all over.
I had one come across my porch when I lived in Colorado Springs, ate my dog food. Came back the next night and ate my dog. So yeah, they'll let you know they're there. That's for sure.
I was just about to say, you're lucky it didn't eat your dog. R.I.P. dog.
It did.
Yeah. Well, my son, this is actually how, and I've mentioned this on the show before, how I got him to really understand it is necessary to have a vehicle preparedness kit, wintertime or not. He was driving up the road to our house one night at about 10:30, and he thought he saw a pack of coyotes in the road. And it turned out it was 3 mountain lions. And he pulled right up to them, and it was a mama and her 2 almost grown youngsters. And there's a look that deer give you when you drive past them. They kind of look up, and they might be used to you, but they kind of wonder if they're going to kill you or if you're going to kill them. The mountain lion looks at you and considers whether or not it's going to kill you. It's a completely different look. And I have not seen one in the wild, but my son stopped, and she just knew exactly where to look in the driver's seat. She knew there was a human in there and just stared him down. But anyway, going back to the story, and we have them all over the place here as well. And
so you're saying the foot's on the other hand then, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I scroll down because whenever you have one of these stories, go to the comments section and see how lost we are. Let's see. It goes into MAGA hats. It was somebody saying it was obviously not a Trumpster wearing a MAGA hat because they don't do PT. Oh, we can do more PT around you, blah, blah, blah. The whole thing became a fight over who our president is and who is wearing a red hat. I just saw another video of a kid that was escorted off 2 Frontier Airlines planes because he was wearing a MAGA hat. And they said that he was causing a disruption. The people that he filmed.
Wait, hold on. He was just wearing the hat, and that was disruptive.
Yes, because it triggered responses. He was called a school shooter by one woman, and another person was attacking him. I forgot what they were saying, but because of the disruption that this hat triggered among other passengers, the individual wearing the hat was escorted off the plane.
Hold on. How does that? That's like completely backwards.
I know. And this is the thing, we talk about this when we talk about personal security, PERSEC. Do you want to be the gray man, or do you want to make a point and wear the MAGA hat and then see what comes down upon you? But should we not be able to wear a hat or express our political beliefs with impunity? And this culture, this society that has been plagued with cultural Marxism, it is not okay. You can wear a Che Guevara shirt, hat, or any of that attire you please with impunity. In fact, you'll probably get a lot of thumbs ups. But you wear this red hat and people are losing their freaking minds.
I find it almost impossible to wrap my head around something as stupid as that. If you can't control yourself because of what you see, how are you ever going to be a productive member of a society? If just looking at something, quote, triggers you in such a way that you can't be productive or you can't control yourself, that's why for hundreds of years, that's why we had asylums. That's why we have people getting medication every day, because they can't control those things. And I find it extremely hard to think that the number of people with some type of what would you call it? Some type of disorder. I'm trying to think of the maladaptive type of a disorder. That there's such a huge increase in people like that. That there shouldn't be any of this problem, and it all comes back to the parents. And it comes back to culture and how our culture has been manipulated and changed over time so that parents don't even know that they're doing the wrong things. And this is the end product of what you get when you have parents not doing the right things because they completely lost track of what the right things are.
And somehow it's again, it's okay. It's cheered on when a teenage boy is attacked by an adult male, has his hat taken off, has a drink thrown at him. We have had the narrative, and we've talked about the lies that the media perpetuates. Again, going back to the Covington Catholic School, that young boy standing there accosted by an adult male who's in his space. I believe he touched him as well with that drum. At the least case, we have an assault. There was no action taken against the man who approached this boy. Yet the whole court of public opinion attacked this kid, attacked the students of the school. Why? He fit every narrative that they hate. White, male, Catholic, at a pro-life rally. What we're seeing here is cultural Marxism. And one pattern I noticed during the last presidential election cycle was that the Democrat Party seems to have thrown under the bus its traditional foundation. The backbone of the party was what? We considered it to be the blue-collar workers. Look how Obama said, I'm going to shut down these coal plants. Well, wait a minute. Weren't these blue-collar coal miners the heart and soul of the Democrat era, of the rise of progressivism in the New Deal era? Didn't we want to protect all these people? But now they have been taken over by the globalists, the elitists, and the intellectuals. This is something I have been saying for some time now. They don't care about these people. That's why that group went for Trump this year for the first time in how long? They've been voting for Democrat and they finally went Republican. Isn't that right? So there's an article here by Mises, and I'm going to share this again. They're asking, is cultural Marxism America's new mainline ideology? And what cultural Marxism here says, and this is by Anthony P. Mueller, the theory says that the driving force behind the socialist revolution is not the proletariat. What did I just say? But the intellectuals. While Marxism has largely disappeared from the workers' movement, excuse me, Marxist theory flourishes today in cultural institutions, the academic world, and the mass media. What have I been saying for so long now on the air? We are kept stupid by the trifecta of evil: government, the education system, and the mass media. The latter two regulated, licensed, paid for by the government to spew out propaganda, to line their pockets, to benefit the government. This is an unholy alliance destroying everything that tradition holds dear, starting with our family and our faith. It is an out-and-out war, and people are too indoctrinated and distracted to realize it. Cultural Marxism goes back to Antonio Gramsci and the Frankfurt School. The theorists of Marxism recognized that the proletariat, meaning the workers, would not play the expected historical roles as the revolutionary subject. Therefore, for the revolution to happen, the movement must depend on cultural leaders to destroy the existing mainly Christian culture and morality, and then drive the disoriented masses into communism as their new creed. The goal of this movement is to establish a world government in which the Marxist intellectuals have the final say. In this sense, the cultural Marxists are a continuation of what started with the Russian Revolution. You want to weigh in on that at all, Greg?
No, not yet, not yet. But as soon as I'll tell you what, as soon as you're done with that little piece there, I'm going to jump all over this thing.
I know. Well, that's why I wanted to get right into this. they go into describing Lenin and the Soviets, led by Lenin, the perpetrators of the revolution, regarded their victory in Russia as only the first step to the world revolution. The revolution was neither Russian nor proletarian. Now, just to give you some insight on how deep the indoctrination goes in the education system, I graduated high school in 1981, and in my civics class, we talked about different forms of government, also world religions. Just a quick aside, in our world religions segment, we discussed Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism. Let's see, no Christianity. That was never mentioned. But when we talked about communism, we were explained that this was the rise of the proletariat, where the workers were finally sick and tired of being oppressed and taken advantage of, and rose to power. And that was communism, where the producers control the means of productions. And this was, even through my undergrad years at UCLA, always touted as a good thing.
I didn't have any of that when I was in high school. We learned that there was a religion called Christianity. But we only learned we learned to an extent of Protestantism, but all we learned was Catholicism. Probably because where I was in New York, it was a huge Catholic area. We learned of Judaism. We had Buddhism, Hindu, Jainism, Taoism, and one other that were the main religions that we had to learn about, and that was it. But we still had it in the system. Now, 4 years later, when my younger brother ended up in high school, he learned about a couple of religions. There was Judaism, Islam, Protestantism, and there was one more, I think Hindu and Buddhist. That was it. Those were the five that he learned about, because it was, quote, understood that you were in a Christian community, and therefore you didn't need to learn about it. That was the understanding. And now, from my understanding from my cousin, who still lives back in our hometown, they don't even teach anything about the Reformation or Martin Luther or any of that stuff anymore. All they teach you is Hindu, Buddhism, and Islam.
And then these kids they know about Che Guevara, all the social justice warriors going on through, but we really don't have any education with regards to, our traditional values.
That's a good point. And that's actually part of, when you look at the 45 goals of communism.
Yes.
Right. When in putting this all together, you have to look at what the communist plan is. There's a couple of points in here that they make. Belittle all forms of American culture and discourage the teaching of American history on the grounds that it was only a minor part of the big picture. Give more emphasis to Russian and world history since the communists have taken over. So there's actually a movement to move away from teaching those types of things, or any part of American history. There's another goal in here that they had: discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step with modern needs, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. Now, don't you see this happening today? This was written and transcribed by Leon Skousen back in the late 50s, early 60s. Now, think about that. You're hearing these types of arguments coming out today about the Constitution, about what do they say about the Founding Fathers? It says here, goal number 30, discredit the American Founding Fathers, present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man. Don't we see that today? Yes, of course we see that everywhere. It's amazing how what has been foretold to us is coming to life right before our eyes, and we don't even acknowledge that it's happening. We're shifting right into cultural Marxism. You're absolutely right, Suzanne. We're actually escorting it in with
And
open arms.
when I took my boys, you're aware of this trip in 2015 in my RV on a trip. We went all the way over to Virginia and went all through and saw places of historic significance, because when you homeschool boys, one thing you learn very quickly early on is that they don't like to sit and read books. You got to get them out there. You know, you see all these pictures of women sitting around a table with kids happy reading books. Guess what? They're all girls. Boys don't do that. So I had to adapt my method of teaching and get them out. So we did. We were gone for an entire month in 2015. And believe me, this is all tying together, folks. We're not just going down, some path of breadcrumbs here. When you mention the education and how they are obfuscating true American history, particularly regarding the founding fathers, and particularly regarding the war against Southern secession and Southern independence, I never expected to come across what I did on that trip. And that's really what got me into radio. What I noticed is we're coming along 70 going eastward to Independence, Missouri, and going through Kansas, as I see a sign that says Lecompton, birthplace of the end of slavery, and a picture of Lincoln. It's still out there.
Yeesh.
And when we went to Harper's Ferry, the lies about John Brown, the lies about what Lincoln did, and promising how he obeyed the Constitution. That's a topic for another show. We have.
I got into trouble at Harper's Ferry.
Oh, I did too. We need to go back. We need to go back. Everybody was so mad at me,
Oh, yep.
That's the problem. And this happened at the other places I went to as well. People wanted to just sit there and listen to this little National Park Service clown in his government issued costume and his little badge and hat.
And his government issued information too,
yes,
by the way.
And what this little propagandist spews forth, they take as the gospel. This is the problem. Yeah. And I started asking questions. Okay, I'll get into this a little bit. He actually said this, and you're going to laugh. The thing about, because first he talked about the geographic area and Thomas Jefferson's, impression of the whole area. It's a very impressive area. So the thing about Harper's Ferry and John Brown, he turned the Civil War into one about slavery. And at that point, my older son put his hand in his head and said, "Oh, here we go." And up goes my hand. And he calls on me, like he's patting me on the head. Yes. I said, when did the raid happen? And he said, in 1859. I said, well, then how could it turn a war that hadn't even started yet into one about slavery? And we went off from there, and everybody was humming and hawing. Fast forward now.
Don't you understand, Suzanne?
Oh, I know. So we go now to Monticello. And Montpelier, the same thing happened. I'm not going to go into that entirely right now, but I actually wrote an article, and it was published by the American Conservative. What they have effectively done at these places is take away the focus of the ideals of and the philosophies of men like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, and turn the entire place into a memorial about slavery. I was excoriated in the comments. Read them. You can find them in the American Conservative. Will the founding fathers be remembered only as slaveholders? One guy said a white woman goes to a plantation and is upset because they talked about slavery. That is an absolute First of all, these people think that the home of Thomas Jefferson was nothing but a plantation. Okay.
Oh yeah,
So, and because I'm white, also, I have no right to comment on my experiences. But I'll post that article. We'll direct people to read that. But this is the problem too. Going back now to the education system. So we have these places of historic interest, even ones that are run publicly. For instance, in Monticello and Montpelier, leftist billionaire David Rubenstein is the one that's responsible for this tremendous shift. In fact, he's even financing the construction of slave quarters where they never existed.
They didn't exist there, right? That's right.
And quickly, when the tour guide at Montpellier, there was a living room with cardboard figurines of people sitting around the dining room table. She said that the Marquis de Lafayette had chastised Madison for not turning his slaves free. And I said, was it legal to turn them free at the time?
No.
Well, I know in some states it wasn't. And I said, Virginia, we happen to be standing in one state where it was not legal. Do you consider Madison a law-abiding citizen or not?
Yeah, right.
People were getting really upset, and somebody said, "Can we please go back to talking about the room?" And I just said, "Oh, by all means, let's talk about the wallpaper, because that is far more relevant.
That's far more interesting and more important than anything else we could talk about here today."
They don't want to hear the truth. They don't. They're simply not interested. They're looking at their watches. They don't want to hear any sort of alternative. So this goes now back to the education system as well. When we are talking about law schools, for instance, our good friend Kevin Gutzman, who's been on here before, I've seen him speak at a few Federalist Society law school engagements. And what they'll do is they'll have him speak about the Constitution. The speech is called, "Whose Constitution is it? Is it the Founding Fathers, or is it that one that has been adopted by the federal judiciary?" And what he says is, we do not have the Constitution today that we did then, thanks to judicial activism. Then I have seen, and this is consistently, it doesn't matter who the law school professor is. They will always say, one of them is, well, the reason it's changed is because the people want it changed. They want these policies. So the federal judiciary sets foot in where the and we're going to do that rather than have an Article 5 convention to amend the Constitution. And the response that Kevin said was, well, look, if you really think this is what the people want, how do you explain when you have the federal judiciary come in there and overstep and override the will of the people that we've seen time and time again? Case in point, Prop 8 in California. Then what they will say also is, the founders were racists, homophobes, misogynists, blah, 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 go, you name it. And
yeah, there's a list.
This is a result of Raoul Berger's book, Government by Judiciary. He was so successful at refuting the criticism of this book that they gave up those factual-based arguments and went to ad hominem, cultural Marxism, which now brings us back to the point of this article. Again, this was a first step in a worldwide transformation. The Russian Revolution was not the result of a labor movement, like I had been taught, but a group of professional revolutionaries. Aren't we seeing that today with Soros-backed foundations paying these losers who have nothing else to do? They don't have a job to do, so they'll go to Craigslist, get offered to be paid, $13 an hour, get on buses and protest. A closer look, the article continues, at the composition of the Bolshevist Party and the first governments of the Soviet state and its repressive apparatus reveals the true character of the Soviet Revolution as a project that did not aim at freeing the Russian people from the Tsarist yoke, but was to serve as the launch pad for the world revolution. And we've seen this is permeating the world as like a rust is. The experience of World War I showed that the Marxist concept of the proletariat as a revolutionary force was an illusion. At the example of the Soviet Union, one could see that socialism could not function, this is crucial, without a dictatorship. These considerations brought the leading Marxist thinkers to the conclusion that a different strategy would be required to establish socialism, because you really can't have a rise of the proletariat and a dictatorial system of government at the same time. Communist authors, according to the article here, spread the insight that the socialist dictatorship must come in disguise. What do we talk about all the time? How we are lied to. Before socialism can succeed, and this is crucial, the existing culture must change. Control of the culture must precede political control. This is Agenda 21. This is the planks of communism. I'm going to go one more paragraph here, and then I'm going to turn you loose, Greg. Cultural control rises in tandem with political control. Aren't we seeing that right now? This is back to the article, helping the neo-Marxists was the fact that many of their efforts in taking control of culture happened parallel to the encroachment of the state on civil liberties over the past decades, at the same time when so-called political correctness has been on the rise. The American government obtained a vast arsenal of repressive instruments. Few Americans seem to know that the U.S. is still under the emergency law that has been in force since George W. Bush used the executive privilege to declare a state of national emergency in 2001. In the same year, 9/11 also opened the path to push through the Patriot Act. From a score of around 95 points, the Freedom House aggregate index of freedom in the United States has fallen to 86 points in 2008. This is what I find a bit incredible. We only lost 9 points.
Oh, no. Hey, let me tell you, I've been watching the International Freedom Index over the last 6 or 7 years, and I put together. I did a show on that here. I put together a spreadsheet, and I was reading through it, and I looked at it and I said, "We're 145th in what?" And there was some things. Let's see if I can find my spreadsheet, because we have lost so much ground that 9 points that you're talking about there, that's just a very small piece of the puzzle. Okay, there's certain categories that we fell like a rock. Here it is here. Harassment and physical hostilities. We're 122nd worst in the world. Security and safety, we're number 45, the 45th safest. Freedom of expression and information, we're the 33rd freest.
That's American exceptionalism for you.
American deceptionalism.
Yes.
I own that one. Political pressures and controls on media, 38 best out of 162 countries that were surveyed. Violent conflicts, 132nd best. Go figure. In carrying out procedural justice, we were 22nd. Civil justice, 22nd. Criminal justice, 19th. And following the rule of law, 25th.
I'm so free I could just puke. Here's our listener, Michael. Again, folks, you can send me messages on Facebook and I will see them and address them on the air. This is why the push for idolizing Lincoln is so pivotal to their plan. It was a revolution into top-down centralized authority. He's absolutely correct. And this is, we're seeing the violence. Mm-hmm. I told you I had to take an anti-Obama sticker. In fact, I've removed all my political stickers from my vehicle. I was accused of surrendering and somebody said, well, their side wins if you do that. But, my first and foremost moral obligation is to keep my kids and myself safe. My son had his driver's permit and he was in the driver's seat. And this gentleman comes up and starts tapping. He's touching my truck, tapping the window, telling my son to roll down the window. 15-year-old kid. This is a man that was probably in his 60s. Mm-hmm. Think about this loser with the drum getting in this kid's face. They are okay with this. I told my son, don't you dare roll that window down. He goes, I won't. And I stood on the running board and hung out the window. By the way, my Glock was on my right hip so the gentleman could see that we weren't to be messed with. But do we really want? And I wasn't brandishing. I wasn't doing anything. I didn't change anything I was doing. I open carry. And I said, sir, may I be of assistance to you? And then he started inquiring about the stickers. And I said, you have a nice day. And we drove off. But I had to think, what would happen to my son if I hadn't been there? He had his driver's license and I've got a 16-year-old driving the car. This was before Antifa was even out there. Mm. So we're at a point now where you are risking physical violence if you have a message that these people disagree with. Now think about the disrespect that this man showed the boy with this hat And then there was another video out with a woman who had very little in the way of pants on, dancing around this older veteran who was holding up a couple of pro-life posters. She's dancing around him in his space and then physically tries to knock them out of his hands. This is acceptable to these people. And you just mentioned that we're risking personal violence, but they can have whatever marches or rallies or expressions that they want to. So here we go into the moral corruption segment of this article. The way toward the rule of cultural Marxist is the moral corruption of the people. We just had a governor of a state say that essentially we're going to have infanticide. And what did they very cleverly do? Shifted the focus on this outrageous proposed policy to racism. Do not forget, these people think it is okay to murder babies. We'll keep them comfortable once they've been born. So now, to accomplish the moral corruption of the people, the mass media and public education must not enlighten but confuse and mislead. Yep, we've already covered that. The media and the educational establishment, remember, two of the three phases or the branches of the trifecta of evil, work to put one part of society against the other part. What have we been talking about?
So go ahead. This is a good point. So that's your binary opposition right there that we've talked about before. Very basic psychological term that says that one side is right, one side has to be wrong, and there's no middle ground whatsoever. But the education thing I thought was very interesting because as you go back and look at, and I've studied the 45 Goals of Communism and how it fits in with cultural Marxism and the Communist Manifesto. And I have to tell you, there's another one in there that talks about getting control of the education system. And I'm going to pull it up here because I want to read it because it's actually almost word for it's here it is here. Get control of the schools. Use them as a transmission belt for socialism and current communist propaganda. Get ready for this. Soften the curriculum. Get control of the Teachers Association, put the party line in the textbooks. The very next line, it says, gain control of all student newspapers. Now think about that for just 1 minute. Everything that your kids are learning, everything that I would have to say, everything that I learned when I was in high school and college had to have at least some communist propaganda built into it. And going back in my head, as I think about the curriculum that I've studied over the years, I have to say honestly that yes, pretty much everything that I've ever read had a certain level of propaganda built into it. All of the history books, everything. And softening the curriculum. Don't we see that here today everywhere we look? What are people complaining about most? Common Core. The Common Core curriculum is a socialist introduced curriculum. That's where it came from. And some of the concepts, for example, in mathematics, some of the concepts that you go through that you're trying to teach a second grader or a third grader are college abstract concepts. These second and third graders are never going to absorb and understand what the heck they're doing. We'd be much better off if we said, Johnny, 2 + 2 = 4. Don't talk to me about friendly numbers. Don't talk to me about regrouping. Kids, they can't understand the abstract concept of a friendly number. But if they see 2 apples and they see 2 more apples, well, they can say without any hesitation that those apples there, them some good apples. Those are 4 apples right there. But the curriculum control in schools is not the only thing that's being controlled. all of the culture, like Suzanne was saying before, culture has to take and go lockstep. Another point in the 45 goals of communism: gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. Now, I find it interesting that at the same time that the communists have been gaining key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures, it's the same thing that the CIA was doing, because they had to embed their level of propaganda to make sure that their propaganda out propaganda did. That's a word. I'm making it a
Now,
word today. They out propaganda did the communists, because the propaganda you get from the CIA has to be better than the propaganda you get from the Russians. Because why? Because it's American propaganda. It's better. American stuff is always better than everybody else in the world, right?
and here
So,
again, we make the schools mandatory, where you're going to ultimately be threatened with jail time if
well,
you're
that's right out of the Communist Manifesto.
right. And
Offer free and compulsory education.
And we know the Prussian schools, where the public education system came from,
Oh, baby.
to what? Raise good factory workers. Common Core, it's set up to raise good little cubicle sitters. We still have the little drones. We're just changing the format of where they're going to be working.
Did you ever see the movie Uncle Buck?
Yes.
With John Candy, and he's sitting in there with melanoma face, assistant principal or whatever her name is. I don't remember her name. He called her melanoma face. And she's sitting there, and your niece is not doing such and such and such and such. She's not a good student. She sits there and she daydreams all day, and she's just the worst kid in the world. And you look at this little kid and what she's done, and he turns back to the assistant principal or principal, whoever she is. He says, "I don't want to know a 9-year-old who's not a daydreamer, who doesn't think differently." And okay, in the middle of a uproariously funny comedy, I sat there and I had one of those holy cow moments in my life, thinking that, wow, we don't even allow these children. My wife's a school nurse over here in an elementary school, and the things that I hear that happen make me very angry inside. These kids aren't having fun. They have limited recess. Nobody makes a joke in class because everybody's offended at everybody else. They have to sit there. They have to go lockstep and follow the curriculum. Otherwise, you can't pass the test. It is horrible. It's not a learning environment.
No, we have robbed future generations of childhood.
We've robbed them of their imagination.
Yes, they don't want kids to think like that. They don't want them to, absorb any independent thinking. And in fact, they keep the curriculum hidden, and a lot now that we have those tablets kids are being given and password encrypted curriculum. The parents aren't having access to this. Again, look at Agenda 21, disrupt the traditional family. I refer to this all the time. There was a video of Al Gore in a high school gymnasium telling people there are things the kids, that your parents don't know. Again, making the parents look foolish and unenlightened. Go ahead.
Goals of communism, number 40, discredit the family as an institution.
Yes.
Encourage promiscuity and easy divorce.
Well, what are we
saying
now?
Hold on. Well, I got one more. And that is to emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents, attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppressive influence of the parent, blaming the parents for the kids' inability to function or act as a productive member in a society who's an independent thinker. You'll be taught to be one of the cogs in the wheel, and you'll be groomed for that, but you're not going to be able to be a creative problem solver. You're not going to have imagination. You're not going to be independent. And if you do have any problems, it's because of your parents. So why don't we, it's America. Why don't we just, everybody start suing their parents for any and every problem they've ever had in their life?
They are. One
really?
Kid, his parents because he's white. This is how crazy this is getting.
And what the hell's wrong with him?
goes back, like Thomas Jefferson believed, going back to Monticello, Thomas Jefferson believed in a public education system. Why? Because he felt it would enable us to have a system where we had enlightened voters that would have a better system of government for us. Well, we have voters that are indoctrinated,
Yeah.
not enlightened, and all again for us to be easily controlled. Let me return to this article for a minute here. When we talk about the moral corruption, again, we see women in these, profane, obscene hats shouting their abortions.
Oh, so before you get that, let me just say this. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, healthy, and beautiful. Go ahead.
San Francisco. I'm from California. San Francisco. And we're seeing this everywhere now. The gay pride rallies, the parades. They're walking around naked and with harnesses and other sick stuff in front of children. We just had a young boy in a bar in New York dressed as a little drag queen, and homosexual males are giving him dollar bills.
What?
Where is our common decency? This just happened recently
in
a bar in New York. So this is all coming under this blanket also of social justice. And in this part of the article that talks about moral corruption, again, the media and the educational system work to put one part of society against the other. Group identities get more specific. The catalog of victimization and history of oppression becomes more detailed. To turn to a recognized victim of suppression is a way to gain social status and to obtain the right to special assistance of respect and social inclusion. I remember when I was in junior high school, my teacher explaining how the white founding fathers thought so little of the blacks that they were only counting them as 3/5 of a human being for not even for representation. She ignored that completely. She just said they were counted as 3/5. She didn't even understand it. I think that's part of the problem too, with teachers having to teach every subject.
Teachers are dumbed down to an extent too.
And speaking of dumbed down, read the book, John Taylor Gatto, Dumbing Us Down.
Yes.
That goes decades before Common Core. They just slapped another name on it. When I was in law school, we were discussing these it should be aptly called con law because it is a con, but constitutional law. Somebody raised the question in affirmative action discussion. Isn't that in and of itself discriminatory in nature? And the
affirmative action?
Yeah.
100%.
And he smiled and said, that is to redress past grievances. So they pick and choose who the winners and losers are going to be.
Good Lord.
Yeah, and they justify it. So again, the demand, back to the article, for social justice creates an endless stream of expenditures deemed essential for health, education, old age, and for all those people who are needy, persecuted, oppressed, be it real or imaginary. Out here in Utah, we have a so-called crisis of, guess what, $1 billion surplus budget. $1 billion of funds sitting around that the Constitution of Utah requires be used for education only. We just had a proposition up for vote to fund the schools. They look to tax us more, especially for education and these social policies, Medicaid expansion out here in Utah. Everything that they said they needed, they used to use this money for, is all for big government intervention to our private lives in areas that should be handled by the private sector. Go ahead, Greg.
Why can't they just give you your money back? It's $1 billion.
Oh,
right?
You go on with that.
Oh, sorry, my bad. I was thinking that since the Department of Indoctrination was formed back in the 70s, that our test scores have gone down. Our placement in science and technology has gone down around the world.
Is it because we're not spending enough money?
And well, that's the silly irony of it all. I don't think we're spending enough money. We do spend on average, and adjusted for, of course, adjusted for inflation, because now we've introduced such great inflation since 1973, um, with the abolition of the gold standard. But adjusted for inflation, we spend more than any other country in the world on education. And we've got mediocre students
By design.
by design. And that's the thing that's just beautiful about this model, Suzanne. You're able to take and the people coming out of the schools are dumber. So of course they're going to vote to have more money taken from them, you see. And then they're not going to be able to, they're not going to have to work, let alone not be able to work, because they're not going to have a trade, or they're not going to be able to think on their own. So you see, it actually is all going to work out really well in the end.
Well, look at Venezuela. By the way, speaking of Venezuela, if you missed Greg's show with your friend Booger,
Booger.
You guys discussed, and this was a mind-blowing episode of The Spy Who Loves Liberty, because we just assumed that the Venezuelans voted socialism into their government, and now we're paying the price. If you missed that episode, it is up on our YouTube and our SoundCloud page. You absolutely must hear this episode. This article, again, the believers of neo-Marxism here we have are mainly intellectuals. Again, look at what we see on the college campuses. Even when I went to UCLA, I had a professor of history, Robert Dallek, noted historian, full-blown FDR lover. Somebody asked him once in class, he had a very rare open forum where people could ask him questions, excuse me, and there were 500 in this class. And somebody asked him about the John Birch Society. And he smugly said that there is no room for discussion of the John Birch Society and institutions of higher education, meaning we're not even going to entertain the thought of people that think differently than we do. And you know, the sad thing is, everybody should have walked out en masse. They cheered. I'm sitting here thinking, am I the only one that doesn't think that this computes at all? And I was thinking I was dumb. Well, maybe I am. But everybody was still just cheering this. And I thought it was great to shut down opposing views or even entertain them at all. Not even a place for them there. Folks, this was in the 1980s.
That's horrible. That's horrible. See, as soon as you start to stifle any type of opposition or opposing discussion, it becomes a one-way dialogue, which is not really a dialogue, is it? It's a monologue at that point. And that's how you get a dictator. You have removed any type of opposition or any type of creative influence into the discussion whatsoever. That's very, very dangerous. And to not even talk about the John Birch Society, at least in New York, we were open-minded enough to be able to talk about the John Birch Society.
And heaven forbid students might learn about other viewpoints and disagree with them. So we're just going to shut them down. But here goes back to, again, the myth that these workers were really the force behind this revolution. They're the ones that really suffer from it, actually. Yep. Let me read from the article. Nowhere was socialism established as a result of a labor movement. Again, this is directly in contravention to what I was taught. The workers have never been the perpetrators of socialism, and this is important, but always its victim. The leaders of the revolution have been the intellectual party politicians and military men.
Are you telling me we've been lied to?
Didn't I? You know what? Somebody ought to write a book called Reverse Deception. It was up to the writers and artists to conceal the brutality of the socialist regimes through the articles and books and by films, musics, paintings, and to give socialism a scientific, intellectual, aesthetic, and moral appearance. And the socialist propaganda, the new system, appears to be both fair and productive. That's exactly what we're seeing today. And the media, look at all the movies that cheer this stuff on. Look at, and television shows, you see all these, some of them not so subtle, castigation of people that might be traditional. I was watching a show recorded, and then it recorded a couple of minutes after. There's this family on television. It's a sitcom, and the kids are saying, "Oh, we're good." The adult kids are saying, "We're going to go to so and so's gay wedding," and the mom of these adult children quoted some scripture. At which point, you could hear the entire audience groan. So again, what is this? This media entertainment attack on Christianity. The cultural Marxists, the article continues, believe that someday they will be the sole holders of power and able to dictate the masses how to live and what to think. Yet the neo-Marxist intellectuals are in for surprise. When socialism should come, indeed, the dictatorship of the intellectuals will be anything but benign and not much different from what happened when the Soviets took power. The intellectuals will be among the victims. Remember, useful idiots. This was, after all, the way it happened in the French Revolution, which was the first attempt of a revolution by intellectuals. Many of the victims of the guillotine were prominent intellectuals who had earlier supported the revolution. Now, I was, and I know, gosh, where did this hour go? I was approached by a young lady in Salt Lake City asking me to sign a petition to expand Medicaid for the children. Don't you want children to have access to healthcare?
Right.
Who doesn't want children? No, I want them to die in the streets. You little idiot. So I told her, what you don't understand here. I said, let me ask you, what's the proper role of government? Who do you think should be providing healthcare? I just got a blank stare. This woman was, she was like 20 years old, incapable of an independent thought. I said, don't realize you're doing. I hopefully will not be alive long enough to realize the fruition of your goals. But what you don't understand is you have a rope around your neck, a noose, and it is attached to a branch of a sapling. And you are watering this sapling, and one day you are going to hang by the neck from the tyranny you are advocating under the auspices of For the Children. Do you not see what you're doing? I didn't sign the petition, and I don't think she learned anything. But I
didn't
said,
sign?
Someday, when your children cannot get access to health care thanks to single-payer system, you think of this crazy lady you met in Salt Lake City and think, you know what? She tried to warn me. Folks, we are calling the alarm. The Marxists have won. We are up against the ropes. We're either going to defeat this or we're not. So either get ready for a fight or you get ready to sit back and hand out what they have to give us. This is the conclusion of the article, but we will post it. Contrary to what Marx believed, history is not predetermined. The march through the institutions has gone far, but there is yet to be a full takeover. I disagree. There is still a time to change course. Folks, that's what we're trying to do here at the Cerberus Radio Network. We are trying to wake people up. This is why we slay sacred cows like Lincoln, like Scalia. We think these are the good guys. You have to change your mindset and get away from what you have been fed. Your mind has been polluted. Once you know the truth, the founders recognized this. They wanted an informed populace. There's going to be a lot more of this coming your way. If you've missed, again, The Spy Who Loves Liberty, check it out. Follow us on the Cerberus Radio Network, on SoundCloud, on YouTube. Please share with your friends. Tell people about us. And we're going to try and turn this ship around. Don't know if we can or not. On behalf of Jeff Johnson and Greg Junkbond Carpenter, I want to thank you for listening to the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. God bless you.